that have not had the pleasure of having me as your instructor. I'm the senior military member of the Combatives Committee, so that's kind of why I'm giving this lecture. So what we're trying to get at today is how do we bridge the gap between the stuff we've been teaching you in class, these individual skills, drills, all these things. How do we take that and turn it into something that we can use as platoon leaders, as future leaders in the organization? Because this committee is somewhat unique in DPE in that we're the only committee that actually aligns with a real Army program, right? There's no mill-move committee out in the Army, much to many people's relief, right? But there is an Army Combatives Program, and it's something you're going to see again. And we want to give you some tools to understand how do I leverage this? How do I use this in my organization? What are kind of the pitfalls? What are the things I need to be aware of to use this effectively as a leader? So I'll give you a quick background kind of on me. So I graduated here in 2008, commissioned as an infantry officer, went through all the infantry schools, IBOIC, Ranger, Airborne, all that stuff, went out to Fort Carson. So I was a mechanized infantry platoon leader with 4th ID, deployed to Iraq from there for a year, came back, went to the career course, did all that fun stuff, and then went up to Fort Drum. I did a rifle company command up there and then a headquarters company command. During that time, deployed to Afghanistan for 9 months. So, give you kind of my background in a nutshell, the thing I want you to understand is I didn't have a background in anything martial arts wrestling. I was on the cross-country team here. I was team captain my senior year, believe it or not. So, I like to say I was skilled in that most ancient form of self-defense of track and field. So, it's hard to really be intimidating when your best comeback line is, well, you got to catch me first, you know. So it didn't go over real well. But everything I learned about fighting and martial arts, that type of stuff, I learned through the Army program. I got introduced to it here, and I've had opportunities to train throughout my career, and finally culminating coming back here, getting Master Trainer certified last year. And the thing I want to understand, I'm not kind of the likely candidate to be up here talking about this stuff. It was not in my background growing up. But I've come to really appreciate the program, and I wish I knew as a platoon leader the stuff I know now. The stuff I know about how to use the program, how to integrate it, how to leverage it. I wish I knew it when I was in your shoes. So hopefully I'm going to be able to give you a little bit of a leg up and understand, hey, here's what this can do for you, here's how you use it. Okay, so that's kind of what I'm getting at today. So I want to start with a short story. So back in 1744, back in the colonial days, right? The colonies were trying to bridge relations between the Native American tribes and then the colonists, right? Trying to improve relations, build kind of some unity across the culture. So one of the things they tried was offering kind of a European education to the young Native Americans. And so in that effort, the College of William and Mary sent a letter to Six Nations Confederation and offered them free tuition for 12 of their young men. If they wanted to send them for a year, 2 years, they would educate them in the European arts and sciences and then send them back. And the thought was, hey, if we can kind of get on the same sheet of music here, we'll probably integrate the two cultures much more successfully. So the Native American tribal leaders sent back a letter that was very polite, but basically said, thanks, but no thanks. And so I'll kind of try and paraphrase that for you here, but basically they said, hey, we really appreciate it. We know you value this kind of education. We know it's important to you, but we have a little different perspective. They said a few years ago, College of the Northern Provinces offered us a similar thing. We sent some of our young men up there. They educated them in all your math and science and European way of study. But when they came back to us, they said they were bad runners. They couldn't live in the woods, they couldn't bear heat or cold, couldn't build a lodge, spoke our language poorly, were incapable of killing a deer or surprising an enemy, and as such were ineffective as counselors or warriors and were good for nothing. But to show you that we value your offer, we would like to respond in kind and say, if you would like to send 12 of your young men to us, we'll take charge of their education and we'll send them back to you as warriors. And so the thing I want you to take away from that is that even that far back, these Native American leaders knew they wanted a certain outcome in the training of their young men. And they realized that for what they wanted as a warrior culture, if you will, that character trait could not be learned in a classroom. You cannot train a warrior in a classroom. And so they understood that for the outcome that they wanted, the training method was very important. And so for us as a warrior organization or a warrior culture, or one that claims to have a warrior culture, we have to think through carefully the training methods that we're using to develop that in our organizations, okay? Because certain things will work, certain things won't. So let's try and define this a little bit. So when we're talking about combatives training, there's two primary outcomes that we want, two training outcomes. Anyone take a wild guess at what they are? One's pretty obvious. Take a guess. What do you think, Thompson? A skill, right? We want to teach you how to fight. We want you to understand the basics. So for sure, there's a need for a skill set. There's one more. What do you guys think it is? Warrior mentality or mindset, right? A warrior mindset. So I want you to think about this in a little more clarity. So you guys learned the warrior ethos at beach, right? Hopefully, pretty early on, you learned what the warrior ethos was. So what is it? I will always place the mission first. I will never accept defeat. I will never be fallen comrade. Very good. So that's awesome. That's a good starting point. But it's a little bit vague, right? What does this really mean in reality? So I'm going to offer up a little bit more detailed definition. The defining characteristic of a warrior is a willingness to close with the enemy. So I'll say that one more time. The defining characteristic of a warrior is the willingness to close with the enemy. So put that in context. We had that force protection exercise yesterday, right? Everyone had a good time with it? Right? Good training event. Got us to think about some of these things a little bit more differently of, hey, if we have an active shooter, how are we going to deal with this? So let's put it in this context. What if we're in class over here, and the classroom next door, someone walks in and starts shooting up our classmates to the next door? The warriors in the room are the ones that are willing to go through that door and go help your buddies, to carry the fight to the enemy. Okay? That's not an easy thing. That's a very, very hard thing, probably one of the hardest things, to be willing to go through that door knowing you could get shot on the other side of it, but still willing to go through it. That's what defines a warrior. And so notice I didn't say anything about what happens to you on the other side of it, okay? When I'm talking about warrior mindset, I'm talking about that willingness to go through the door. What are you willing to do? Are you willing to be the warrior in the room, the one that understands that I signed up to be the one that goes to fight? That I understand that that's my role, and I identify with that. What am I willing to do? Now, once you get on the other side of that door, now that skill set piece kicks in of now what can I do when I get on the other side? Do I have the skills necessary to survive and win in that environment? So when our training, when we come down to it with this Army combatives and what we're trying to do, number one, first and foremost, is a warrior mindset. We must develop that in our formations. We're not going to win our next war based on our hand-to-hand skills, hopefully, right? But I promise you, we will win or lose our next war based on whether or not our formations have a warrior ethos. So how do we train and develop that? So warrior mindset, what am I willing to do? Warrior skill set, what can I do once I'm in the fight? What have I trained for? What do I have the skills to accomplish? Okay? So, let's talk a little bit more detail about each of this. So a warrior mindset. Why do we think this is important? So I'll give you a quick story. Ever heard of the 507 maintenance unit? You guys have heard of them? Jessica Lynch's unit? Okay. So, early days of the War on Terror, 507 maintenance unit moving across the battlefield, gets lost in an urban area, gets ambushed, most of the unit killed or captured. Jessica Lynch was among them, generated a lot of publicity because she's the first female that had happened to, first situation like that. So what was interesting as they went through the ARs and the incident reports is that every single weapon in that company, from sidearms all the way up through crew served weapons, malfunctioned. So you guys have been in the Army now 2 years, going on 3 years, and involved with this. So what does that tell you about what was happening or not happening with weapons maintenance? Wasn't happening, right? Weapons maintenance wasn't happening. So they're downrange, they're on the battlefield. They had the requisite number of NCOs and officers, right? All of them, I'm sure, were good at their jobs. But why didn't they prioritize that? What do you think? What do you think, Lorenz?
I know that their unit SOP was to not leave them up or anything because they didn't want them getting dirty with the sand, and so that's why they didn't do that. And they were focused, obviously, on kind of the rear echelon support because they were in the back end of the movement to
Sure, but ultimately, so you said part of it, right? They're focused on their job in the rear. But we clean the weapon not just so it stays clean, but so it functions, right? So if they didn't think they needed it to function, what would they think about their role? They're not the ones that are going to be using them, right? They're not the ones that are going to have to employ this weapon system against the enemy. Not the ones that have to fight. So that mindset, or lack of a warrior mindset, influenced everything they did. They weren't doing weapons maintenance. They didn't understand land nav. They didn't understand battle drills. Arguably didn't understand first aid, CASEVAC, that kind of stuff. All these things that come naturally if you identify this idea that I'm the one that has to do the fighting, or maybe the one that has to do the fighting. And if I understand that, I'm going to put time into weapons maintenance. I'm going to put time into understanding I know how to land that. I understand the basics of battle drill and fire and maneuver. So that concept drives the rest of the training. And if they had identified with that, we can, what if it, for days, but likely most of that unit wouldn't have been killed or captured, as it turned out. Okay? So they lost sight of that idea of that a warrior mindset was important to their formation, okay? And that they're the ones that might have to do it. So when we're developing a training program that we want to develop this, there's kind of a unifying thread that must be part of the training if we're going to develop the warrior mindset. So, anyone know what department here at USMA is responsible for developing warrior ethos of Corps Cadets? No, not DMI. Not DMI. It's DPE. It's DPE, right? So, that seems a little counterintuitive. You would have thought it's military instruction, or maybe even BTD with summer training, right? But here's the thing. So if you look across our courses, all of our core courses that we teach here, the unifying thread you're going to see in all of them is fear management. Fear management. And that's because going through that door takes overcoming your own personal fears of dying, right? And that's legitimate. But we give you small slices of that in swimming, jumping off the tower, right? Or throwing heavy equipment on you and then throwing you in the deep end of the pool. Or boxing, right? Getting punched in the face. Move, flipping around on weird apparatuses, that kind of thing, right? And then we culminate it with this class where we have you try and kill each other for fun, right? So the idea is we're putting you in that stressful situation or a stressful situation, and you get reps at overcoming those personal fears that's prepping you for going through that door someday, right? Because that takes training. You don't just do that overnight. You have to figure out how to be training. And so the unifying thread is fear management. Any of you guys heard of Tim Kennedy? You guys know who he is? UFC fighter, pretty high level guy, former Green Beret, Special Forces sniper, fairly bad dude. He has a podcast called Sheepdog Response, I believe it's called. He had a guy on several months ago by the name of Chris Perkins. He worked with Mr. Larson in the early days of the Combatives Program. And they were talking about this idea of how do you develop a warrior mindset, why is it important in our formations. And Chris Perkins said, I didn't realize the importance of the Combatives Program until the first time I got caught in a near ambush downrange. They wouldn't know what's a battle drill to react to a near ambush. Turn and burn here, right? So essentially, I'm going to throw frags, I'm going to return fire, and I got to assault through right away. I got to get out of the kill zone and smash through the enemy. So is that a natural reaction to a human being when you get surprised by mortal danger? No, what's hardwired into you to do? Turn and run, right? But if you do that in that situation, you'll almost certainly die. Because your only hope is to close with the enemy and overwhelm them with firepower, right? That's your only hope, because you're in the kill zone, you're going to die if you don't. So Chris Perkins said, I learned that reaction on the combatives max. We just did punch defensive matrix in here, right? Just finished up about learning how to defend punches from the guard. What is critical to defending punches in terms of distance? You got to close it, right? So our natural thing is we want to get away, but where you're safe is actually to close and control them, right? That's how we manage it. So we get reps at that kind of stuff in here. It's small tastes of it, but it's the same reaction. It's the same thing we're training in here. So this idea of fear management is critical to developing a warrior mindset. This is the reason that the Army Combatives Program is a grappling-based program, right? It's because we're not solely focused on the battlefield skill set. That's part of it. but we also need a training method that has this element of fear management. And for us to do that, we have to be able to train it live at 100% intensity. So if you're training a boxing program, do I have any boxers in here? Anybody that boxed at some point? Can you train and spar hard 100% every day? No, absolutely not. Like, you're going to get hurt, people are going to get concussed, all this stuff. We can train pretty hard every day with grappling, right? Because of the nature of the program. So that lets us get at this element of getting those reps and going hard against a fully resistant opponent every day, and we're building that mindset piece. And that's why the Army Combatives Program is largely grappling based. As you progress, you get more into striking, but it's not the fundamental of the program. So the fundamental is to teach you, yes, how to fight, but also how to manage fear and deal with this when someone's trying to choke you out. How do you deal with it? All right, so let's talk now about skill set. Mr. Larson talked in his lecture last time about the proverbial "I would just shoot you" guy, right? You guys remember that? So that's the guy that is probably a tanker, more than likely. That just says, well, if I have to get out of my tank and I have to engage someone hand to hand, then hell has frozen over and yada, yada, yada. I'm just going to shoot him from 3,000 yards away, blah, blah, blah. So it's a pretty weak argument because we can think easily of tons of examples of why you wouldn't just shoot him, right? A lot of them because of the ROE. Right? You may not, maybe he's a high-value target. I don't want to shoot him. I want to take him alive. Or maybe he's a civilian that just doesn't understand what I'm telling him. I'm not going to shoot him. So it's a weak argument. And what we need to think through in terms of skill set, it comes back to our idea of, do I identify as a warfighter or not? What's my role as someone that wears this uniform? Okay? Because I can give you, and if you want, I'll give you stories later. I can give you a story for every branch of someone that had to use combatives in a situation they didn't expect and either save their life or somebody else. Like, everyone has to do it. Here's an interesting fact. Most people, more people had to use hand-to-hand skills downrange over the last conflict than employed their weapon system. So hand-to-hand skills was more important than marksmanship in the last conflict as far as number of people that had to use it, okay? So understand it's more prevalent than you think. But I don't need to go down that rabbit hole. What I want you to think about is, what is our role as an Army? What's our mission? What's our mission statement for the Army? Fight and win the nation's wars, okay? Any of you guys read the Army vision statement recently? Probably not, right? It was published here earlier this year. It's worth your time, about 2 pages. Prominent in that is a focus on readiness and a focus on lethality, okay? Lethality. So, what's lethality mean? What do you think? Being able to kill somebody, right? And so there's 2 ways you can do that. Number one, you can do that through equipment, right? I can throw a lot of money at the problem and get new toys to kill the enemy farther away. Or I can focus on training, and I make the weapons chassis that much more lethal. How many of you are more lethal now than the first day you stepped in this classroom? Hopefully all of you, right? We've been teaching you to kill people with your bare hands, right? That's awesome. So, understanding this idea that as a member of this profession, that's a focus of your leadership, is to make you more lethal. A phrase from the vision statement says, we want soldiers of unmatched lethality. That starts, first of all, with you learning how to control this weapons chassis, which is me, right? Understanding, how do I become more lethal? That starts with good PT. It starts with learning how to fight. Then I give you a weapon system, and that becomes a force multiplier. But it starts with you. Does that make sense? And so getting a hold of this idea. It's the same concept. Why do we do PT every morning? Every unit across the Army, every formation. Why do we do it? What do you think? Right. It comes down to, it's not about cohesion. It's not about physical fitness. It becomes about, fitness is an enabling objective for me to physically dominate the battlefield. And if I'm not able to do that, if I'm not fit, if I'm out of shape, I'm a liability to myself and to my unit. So physical fitness becomes something we must do, and we've embraced as an Army that we must do this in order to be ready to fight and win on the battlefield. That's what it comes back to. All of our training must be tied back to this, okay? So, we can argue the specifics of branches and all that, but I want you to get a hold of this idea that being a warfighter and being ready is not branch specific. It comes to all of us, okay? So when we put the rubber to the road, how do we go about this? How do we develop a training plan to develop a skill set, okay? So the way this will commonly go is through something that we call terminating training, And what that means is commander, first sergeant, they get together, get their heads together, and they say, hey, I think we need to do some combatives training. I say, I think that's a great idea, first sergeant. We have some time, 6 weeks out on Friday afternoon. Let's put it on the calendar. Who do we have that can train? We're like, well, I don't think we have anyone in the company, but there's a local gym guy down here. He's a third-degree black belt in Who Flung Poo, and he said he would love to come up and give us some training at some point. So they call the guy up, and he's going to ask, how much training time do I have? What's your mission set? What are you guys training for? And from that info, he's going to develop a plan that takes into account your mission set. He's going to figure out what techniques are going to be relevant, what's simple to learn, and how much time does he have to teach it. And then he's going to knock it out. You're going to do your training, you put a nice check mark on your calendar, and move out. 6 months later, when you guys get downrange, how effective do you think that's going to be into you being able to actually use those techniques? Minimal, not probably at all, right? Because fighting is a physical skill. Different from like land nav or even first aid, right? It's a physical skill that I have to learn how to do. And what does it take to learn any physical skill? Reps, tons and tons of reps. We have to do thousands of reps, right? There's a process that governs this. It's called the Psychomotor Learning process. 3 stages to it: cognitive stage, the associative stage, and then the autonomous stage. So to briefly describe that, cognitive stage is when I'm trying to intellectually understand what's going on, right? When we teach you a technique out here, Captain Brennan, Mr. Furlong comes out, they demonstrate it. So you're watching, you're trying to understand what he's actually doing. Then we break you out and you start practicing it, and you're trying to think through the steps and remember what he just demoed, and you're trying to process it. Then once you kind of have the idea of it, then you move into that associative stage. You're trying to make associations, right? So I'm picking up a little speed, but it's real kind of disjointed. It's not smooth yet. I'm like trying to think through, okay, I grab your wrist, and I sit up, I reach over, and you're thinking through the steps as you do it. Then eventually, after you've done that hundreds and hundreds of times, it becomes just automatic. Like you see the hand and you go, you rip it, you know? Because you'll understand you've done it enough times, it's automatic. Think of another example, right? You ever see a little kid trying to learn how to dribble a basketball? My 5-year-old son's trying to do this right now, trying to figure out how to dribble it. And so it looks a lot like this, and then it's on the ground, right? And so he's trying to cognitively understand what he has to do to dribble this basketball. And so eventually they start to get it, but they're like staring at the ball and they're doing it with 2 hands, right? So he's kind of bridging the gap between that cognitive and associative stage. And eventually he can do it with 1 hand and keep it going, but he's got to watch it, you know? And then he starts walking and trying to do it slow. All that, reps, reps, reps. Then eventually, someday, you know, that kid is the point guard for his high school team, running up the floor, running the play. Do you think he's consciously thinking about that basketball? Is he thinking about dribbling? No, it's part of his hand at that point. What is he thinking about? The play, the defense, the tactical situation, right? That's the point we need to get to with our fighters. We don't need you to be black belts, but we need you to be able to think clearly in the middle of the chaos about what's going on and not have to get concerned with, shoot, where does my hand go when I need to do this armbar? Or, you know, which side do I pummel? Which one's my underhook? You know, I don't want you thinking about that. That's why I make you pummel every day here in class, right? So when you come in and you smash into somebody, you automatically start digging for those underhooks, right? Because you've done it enough, it becomes automatic. So, for our training, we have to take this into account. We have to account for how do we get the reps we need that we actually get proficiency. Yes, so.
Sir, what was the 3rd stage?
Autonomous. Okay, so the way we do this in our programs is through the drills. So the drills we've been teaching you guys. So let's name them off. What drills have we learned in this class? Drill 1, very good. Drill 2, excellent. Drill 3, all right, there's some more. That's the easy one. What else? Takedown drills, yep, we did takedown drills. What else? Pummeling, yep. We did the strike defense drill. Yeah, I'll give you that. What else? How about top, bottom, out? We did at the beginning, right? That's a drill. We did some armbar drills, right? Say again? Yeah, the stand and base, like get back to your feet drill, right? You get knocked down, how do we get back up? Exactly. So there's at least 8 or 9 drills that we've taught you in this class. The drills are the way you get after the reps you need to get to proficiency in your group, okay? So, when you're putting the rubber to the road and you're trying to develop your unit combatives program, there's 3 steps you need to account for. First step, you need to set the unit culture. Second step, you need to integrate it into PRT, integrate your combatives training into physical readiness training. Third thing, you need to integrate it into your tactical scenario training, okay? So, excuse me, if you are first of all trying to set the unit culture, there's 2 ways you do this. Number 1, through competitions. Mr. Larson talked about this at length last class, right? Or last lecture. What 2 types of competitions are there? Formal and informal, right? Both are important. So competitions are the way we force the unit toward what we want to develop, because everyone must participate. You don't have a choice, right? You have to train in order to participate. So competitions become the forcing function we have to value this within our organizations. Soldiers will train to the test. Okay, whatever the test is, whatever you're testing and inspecting routinely, as a leader, soldiers will train towards that. So it's the best tool you have to set a culture within your organization that we're the platoon, we're the company that's fighting all the time. Because it's really hard for us to lose track of the idea that we're the ones that may have to do the fighting if we're fighting all the time. Okay? So we set the culture. Competitions is the first step. Incentives are another thing you have available. And this usually looks like either I'm recognizing the winners of the competition, recognizing excellence within the program, give a t-shirt, give a 4-day pass, give a coin, something like that. Recognition in front of the company. Schools are another big one you have. There's 3 levels to the Army program, right? Level 1, 2, and 3, very creatively named. But each of those are valuable to your enlisted soldiers, and it shows your priorities as a leader. Leaders prioritize the schools that develop the skills they want in their organization. Also, schools are very important to enlisted, right? More so than they are to you, because it counts for promotion points, it helps in their career advancement, and it helps round out their skill set and make them more valuable to organization. So, giving schools as an incentive is a big deal. So, set the culture. Number 2, we need to integrate into PRT. So just like there's a wrong way to do this when we're doing combatives training, there's a wrong way to do it when we're integrating into PRT. Most common thing you're going to see is people say, Thursday is combatives day. The problem with this is that you've got 90 minutes of PT, right? You're trying to fill. When we are doing combatives, how much time do we actually spend like sparring in here? Depends, right? 10, 15 minutes, depends. That arguably is the portion of the class that is the most beneficial for PT, right? You're not going to roll for 90 minutes. Well, I say you shouldn't probably roll for 90 minutes, okay? So what happens is you end up spending a lot of time teaching a bunch of techniques, and then you guys roll for the last 15, 20 minutes. So you end up seeding 45 minutes to an hour of PT time that could be focused on fitness, which is another training objective we need to get at, and focusing instead on teaching stuff. So we're giving up an hour a week of PT that we could be getting some benefit out of. So the better way is that we integrate the combatives training into what we're already doing daily, right? So maybe we're doing the drills as part of our warm-up. So we do our preparation drill or our little warm-up run, whatever we're doing, and they said, okay, Mondays, for part of our warm-up, you're going to do 4 rounds through drill 1 with Ben Armbar from the top. Tuesday, we're going to do drill 2. Wednesday, we're going to do drill 3. So you're just getting little touches every week, right? Just rebluing it a little bit. Integrating it becomes part of our culture and part of who we are as an organization. But it's not dangerous. We're not fighting every day. We're just remembering and keeping these techniques fresh, right? It's a good warm-up, sure. Other things we can do. Integrate it into a circuit, right? Maybe we're doing some kind of circuit workout. We're doing push-ups, sit-ups, air squats for a minute. Maybe our 4th station, we make competitive pummeling, right? You're going hard. That's a good workout. Put it into your circuit. Maybe we do a ruck march, right? We're going for a 5-mile ruck. We come back. We're going to do 3 3-minute rounds of ground sparring. And then that starts building into us, hey, you got to actually be ready to fight when you show up on the objective, like those kind of things, right? So we're not smashing people with it, but we're just touching it, constantly rebluing it, constantly keeping it fresh, and it becomes part of who we are as an organization, okay? And we're getting those reps over time. So the defining thing we needed for warrior mindset was fear management. The defining thing we need for a skill set is reps, right? We've got to get these reps in order to get at this physical skill. So when you come to your commander and you're trying to develop this training program, he's going to evaluate your plan through kind of 3 priorities. He's going to look, how much time is this going to take? What resources is this going to take? And what's going to be the impact on readiness? Okay? So first of all, if you come in and say, I've got this standalone training event, I'd like to go out to the field and we're just going to spend a day training combatives and scenario-based training, whatever, he's not going to be real interested because he's got a long list of training he'd like to do as a company commander. He's got time to probably do about 2 of those things because the rest of his training time is filled up with, battalion and brigade level stuff. So he's not going to be real anxious to burn one of his, big training days on an individual training skill, like combatives. So if you come in and instead can say, sir, I've got this idea. I know we're doing tactical checkpoints. We've been working on some combative skills in the morning as part of PT. Do you think we could integrate some of what we've been working on with this training? We've been working on vehicle extraction. We've been doing cuffing techniques. We've been doing detainee management. I think we can integrate this really well with this training event. He's going to love that because now you've added training value to his event, but you haven't taken any additional time or resources, right? So you're combining the 2 and making a better training event for him. The last piece he's going to look at is readiness. So how is this going to help his mission, number 1, but possibly more importantly, how are you going to avoid getting people hurt? Because that's the biggest obstacle you're going to have to overcome is the stigma out there that combatives is dangerous and it is a high risk event, high risk training event. The reality I want you guys to understand, first of all, we'll table this for a minute. The reality is combatives is not that dangerous when it comes down to training. And I was in the same boat for a long time. I had a soldier get hurt when I was a platoon leader training. I had one soldier get hurt. My commander shut down our platoon combatives program, and that was it. And I didn't really push it anymore because I didn't really have a dog in the fight, didn't know much about it. And okay, combatives is dangerous, we're not doing it. So, based on the data, okay, anyone know what was the highest casualty-producing event outside of direct combat injuries that sent people home from theater in the last war? Basketball. Pick up basketball, okay? And I haven't heard anyone on a raging campaign to shut down basketball in the Army, okay? We encounter it here. Do you know what's killing us right now in company athletics? Handball. Handball is killing people, okay? People are getting destroyed in handball. So, combatives is actually a lot less injuries right now than handball does. So, what I want you to understand, I'm not, throwing rocks at handball or any sport. But the reality is, a lot more people get hurt playing sports than they do combatives, okay? And so if your commander is not also trying to shut down those programs, then the real root of what he is saying is ultimately he's afraid of the program, okay? And probably don't tell him that, but understand that in your mind, right? Understand what's going on, and the real problem you have to address is not fear of injury, it's fear of embarrassment, okay? It's fear of people getting embarrassed. Because as a leader, as a platoon leader, squad leader, whatever, there's a natural resistance to getting on the mat with the private and a fear that he's going to ball you up, right? Maybe he's an all-state wrestler, and that's to be expected, So what you've got to get by, and this kind of comes back to shaping culture, is that it doesn't matter who wins or loses. What matters is that we're all training and we're all getting better. And that losing is not about losing on the mat. That you don't lose face if you lose on the mat as long as you're tough and competent. Losing is refusing to get out there and participate. How many of you guys did CTLT already? How many of you had or saw the lieutenant that would sit in his office and send his platoon out on a 12-mile foot march, but he suddenly had some office work he had to do? Anyone encounter that? See a couple hands? Yeah. What did the soldiers think of that guy or gal? What do you think, Rieger? You had your hand up, right?
Didn't respect him at all.
Didn't have any respect for him, right? That's a common thing. We tell you guys all the time, you gotta lead by example. But if you're avoiding the training that you don't like, the soldiers will see that, and they'll see through you very easily. And that's how you lose face. It's not about getting on the mat and losing. It's about not being willing to do it. And they'll see through that quickly. And you'll lose respect. And so the way you get around that is you got to help your leaders understand that. Number one, losing is not losing, right? Losing is not training. And then secondly, help them get the training they need so they're not embarrassed. So they become the subject matter experts. Do a training, okay? All right, so number one, I just want to understand what's the understanding about the injury argument, right? Number one, it's not really grounded in the data. It's not true. But secondly, the real fear is more about loss of face, right? But once we get past that, this is a contact sport, right? People do get hurt playing this. And what causes injuries in combatives is exuberance and ignorance. Not knowing what I'm doing and trying to do it really fast, okay? That's what gets people hurt. So great example. Last fall, before we kind of changed up the format for our submission grappling program, first fight of the year, first night, first fight, I had a plebe going against a yuck, and they're grappling, and this plebe has maybe a grand total of 45, yeah, Silver's company. He has maybe 45 minutes on the mat at this point, right? Athletic kid, competitive kid. He gets caught in an armbar from the guard, right? So underneath, he's stuck, panics, doesn't realize what this is, just knows his arm is stuck and he wants it out, right? Doesn't know what it is. It wasn't even that good of an armbar. It was super sloppy. Kid didn't do anything wrong. But, so kid freaks out. He's trying to score points for his team, doesn't want to lose, competitive environment. So he tries to do some high-speed somersault out of this armbar, goes completely the wrong direction, throws all of his weight into the submission, snaps his arm. Whole room hears it. Pow! Right? So, not my best first night. Right? Classic example of exuberance and ignorance. That we don't want to put this guy into that situation until he has a little bit of experience. I don't let people roll until they're familiar with the drills. Right? I don't want you rolling full out until you can at least do drill 1, 2, 3. Okay? So, all the time we get requests for DP to come help with training, want to run a combatives event on the weekend. Great, we love to help you. But without fail, you guys are like, yes, we want to teach 3 techniques and then we're going to have a company tournament. Like, no, you're not doing that, right? You're not going to do that because you've got such a wide range of experience. You have a few people that know what they're doing, and then you've got the plebe that's never seen this before, and you're going to make these guys fight, and people are going to get hurt. So you've got to gradually ramp up to that. That's the way you prevent people from getting hurt. We work on the drills. We start there. Then we open up our game through our sparring is control. First thing we had you doing here was pummeling, right? That's sparring, but it's really constrained. Then we did top, bottom, out. Also sparring, but really constrained. Then we just roll for position. Then we just gave you 1 or 2 submissions that you could work with, right? So we gradually open it up as people gain experience. That's the best way that you can prevent those injuries. Don't let them do a tournament the first day you have a training event, okay? Secondly, we always start you in positions in here, right? We put you in side control. We put you in top mount, have you spar from there. A lot of injuries happen in that chaos in that first couple of minutes, right? Where you're trying to get to a position, you're trying to do a takedown, you're trying to get somebody flipped over, someone lands weird, gets an arm caught weird, and that's where injuries happen. So we eliminate that by starting you in a position. You're a little bit careful about size matchups, those kind of things. That's not too big of a deal because we want you to learn to fight anybody. You don't get to pick your terrorist on the battlefield, right? But it's things we can account for in training. All right, so let's do a quick recap. We went through the program here. So what are the 2 objectives of combatives training? Mindset, skill set. Mindset talks about what am I willing to do, skill set is what can I do, right? What is the integral piece that we need in our training for it to develop a warrior mindset?
Fear management.
Fear management, right? Fear management. How about skill set? What's the thing that's most important for us to get after skill set?
Reps.
Reps, exactly. And what process governs how we learn physical skills? Psychomotor learning process. 3 stages to it. Make sure you understand those. I'm not going to ask you right now. All right, once we get into our program, what are the 3 steps to develop a combatives program? Number 1, set the culture. Number 2, integrate the PRT. Number 3, tactical training. All right, very good. Tactical training, the key to that is you're only limited by your imagination, right? Be creative with it. You can come up with any scenario that could incorporate a combative or hand-to-hand type situation. What are the 3 things commanders use to evaluate training priorities? Time, resources, readiness. Okay, impact on readiness. Very good. All right, any questions, guys? Any questions on any of that stuff? Yeah.
What are there like rules associated with applying combative as far as like how many people you need there that have certain levels of it of training? Like you can't just
Good
go out
question.
there and go like, we're doing it today, I'm teaching you.
Yes, you can actually.
The level one certified.
So the certification programs do not qualify you to teach it or instruct it. They are there to just help you get a baseline, right? You don't have to have any certifications to teach it. Combatives is a commander's program. So anyone he wants to put in charge of it can do it. You don't have to have a certain level of certification to do it. It helps. It'll help you get in line with the Army program. It'll help you build your program, but you don't have to have it. Good question. So yes, you can go out and just train, for sure.
I've heard from a lot of people, and even from some of my friends that are like listening guys that are like they're gonna send people to like get people trained, so they don't want to like start it immediately if they're gonna like have a bunch of injuries.
Sure.
If they cut this class, but like that's only some like 19
Sure.
lessons. So
It helps, right? Getting people to the classes or the courses absolutely helps.
Yeah.
But it's still understanding the things I talk about, how to manage the training, is more important than getting people certified. You can still have everybody certified and make the same mistakes I already talked about of having people fight too early. But sending them there is going to help them understand the basics. It's going to help for sure. But you don't have to. Anything else? All right. Gentlemen, anything else you guys want to put out? All right. On that note, we are out of time.